guys, this is the last session of this series, and I've got to say, as we moved into lockdown in March, and I started asking myself, how can ACH, how can Student Housing Insight, SHI, how can we help the industry through this? And this webinar series, Planning for Fall 2020, was really born out of that reflection, that self-reflection. And I started working on this tagline that you see on the slide here, and the following statement just kind of captured everything I wanted to touch on, which is serving students, employees, and communities in an atmosphere of uncertainty. When I wrote that, I was only thinking about helping our industry navigate a pandemic, if that's not enough. But while social justice issues have been important to myself and I believe to our industry in general, I did not think we would be including topics on diversity and inclusion in this series. However, in a wake of current events that were sparked from the recent deaths of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, I started thinking about our students and what will be on their minds this fall as they return to campus. I realized then this is a topic that our industry needs to be discussing and preparing for. These issues, they'll be front and center of our residents' minds this fall as they return to campus and begin readjusting. You pile on the continued frustrations and limitations related to the pandemic, and of course the politically charged atmosphere going into the November elections. Student housing providers need to be ready. And you may say, Wes, we're just providing housing. What do we need to be prepared for? Well, if you call yourself a student housing provider, I would be thinking about some of the following. How might roommate and neighbor interactions be impacted? What kind of programming and communication can be made to encourage students to focus on activities like voting and community involvement versus misguided events that could put students in danger and even property at risk? I wanted to invite two people to speak with me on these topics. Both people I consider dear friends. One of them I've known for 8 years. He's been a coworker, and we've gone through some pretty difficult things together that allow us to talk very openly and honestly with each other about race. The other guest is someone that I first came in contact with just a couple of weeks ago, and in just a few conversations we've had, he's made me think about things related to diversity and inclusion that I've never even considered. The first is Terence Jackson. Terence is an executive director for Pierce Education Properties at their Casey Cove community in Columbia, South Carolina. And big shout out, Terence, to you and your team for reaching 100% for the second year in a row. I believe it's the second year in a row, correct?
That is correct, Wes. That is correct. We're going for the three-peat.
And the second is Quan McLaurin. Quan is the former director of diversity retention at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. I say former because Quan recently resigned from his position as a form of protest due to the lack of action that the university's leadership has made regarding diversity and inclusion issues, combined with the leadership's recent public comments that were the source of a lot of pain and frustration with the university's students and staff and faculty who are also people of color. In his own words, and let me pull this up to read it. In his own words from his resignation letter, my decision to resign lies in the conflict of my job description and basic expectations of a higher education diversity professional, and the reality of inaction and suppression of tangible support for our minority student population. Quan's resignation has not only garnered media attention, but sparked a string of resignations of other staff members of color in order to provide financial help to many of the staff members who are resigning due to these moral conflicts. Quan has established the LU Underground Railroad Fund. In addition to staff leaving earlier this week, or in addition to the staff leaving earlier this week, 3 Liberty University football players and a Liberty University women's basketball player have announced their intentions to transfer due to another incident of a professor being recorded of making racially insensitive comments to students in a classroom. I honestly wish this was just a Liberty issue. They're not the only university dealing with these types of issues with leadership and faculty. UNC Wilmington, in my home state, is currently embattled with one of their criminal justice professors, Mike Adams, after he tweeted a comment at the North Carolina governor comparing the state's recent COVID-19 stay-at-home measures to slavery. Not going to get into all of that. You can certainly go and Google it if you're not familiar with it. But in this final session of our last installment, I want to spend some time with Terence and Quan to have them share their insights on how we can prepare ourselves to listen to our students this coming year. This is not something that has never happened before as far as the state of affairs in this country. If you go back and look at 1968, which was also an election year, it was also the same year in that spring that Martin Luther King Jr was assassinated. RFK Jr was, RFK was assassinated after the California primary, I believe it was California primaries. And if you go and obviously you'll see things like the Orangeburg massacre in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where 3 students were killed in that spring after a protest for segregation at a bowling alley. You can also go and see kind of an uptick in sit-ins, which had actually started in 1960 in North Carolina. Those began again, and then you go into 1969 and you look at the number of protests that happened, not just on Columbia University. Those actually began in 68 as well, where they even took faculty members hostage over the situation with the protests there. So I think it really behooves us as student housing managers to really think about that, because of course you can go to and Google any university in 1969 protest and just start taking notes, because that's exactly what started to happen. There's not a college campus, very few college campuses in 1969 that did not have a string of protests that happened. So because of that, I feel like it's something that we need to be talking about. So Quan, Terence, welcome.
Thanks, Wes, for having us.
So Quan, you've been hearing from students who feel like they are being ignored and even mistreated by university administrators. Those university administrators would not listen to your advice, but you have a group of student housing officers and operators across the country and around the globe that are listening and watching this. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for allowing Terence and I to join your platform and to be able to speak. I guess the most tangible piece of advice that I would give just starting out is to come from a place of understanding. We have all come from an unprecedented experience for at least our generation that we are catering to Gen Z and emergent generations. And there's been a pandemic where we have shut everyone shut everything down, shut everyone into their homes. And then we have these examples and clear incidents of, just the racial trauma that Black people experience within our nation, put on loop on these media platforms over and over and over again. And the nation is coming to a place where all at once we are reckoning with the plight of Black people and people of color, and it's at the forefront of our nation's stage. So come with, I would say, an understanding that the students coming to campus this fall are tired and they are exhausted. And they, like, this is probably going to be one of the hardest starts to a semester that they have ever or will ever experience.
I would also like to add on to that, Quan, is that I think that we also have to come with a certain level of sensitivity. And I know that in my experiences, when interacting with a resident or even a parent, having to take a step back and realize, okay, let me try to figure out what is really happening here. Where are they really coming from? And when you have a resident that may storm into your clubhouse and they may storm into your office, I've had many of those experiences. Um, but understanding that, okay, I wonder what's really happening, and I wonder what's really going on with this particular student at 1 o'clock or 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. Did they just have a bad grade, or are they having stress and anxiety because of what's taking place from their homes? And so I think that upcoming and even now, practicing for what's happening is that we should all just practice taking a step back first. We should all practice on just taking an inhale and an exhale, and then also listening. I think is the most important tool that we can offer upcoming for the fall. To add on to what Quan is saying, is that we should be sensitive and we should just open up our listening portals and really listening and understanding to, okay, what's happening here? What are they actually saying? What are they actually feeling? So that I know how to focus in on, on their needs, how to offer them the help that they're actually asking for, but not asking directly, because you're right, Quan, they are coming very tired. You have a lot of students that will be out protesting. They've been watching social media. They've been watching TikTok videos. They've been watching YouTube videos, and coming and driving that energy and then moving in and interacting with, someone that may not offer the same viewpoint that they have.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't
Yeah.
know what other outlets they have available to them once they come to campus, because again, we're removing students from the support system that they just had at home. We're placing them, back within their collegiate communities, and they're having to reacclimate and learn how to deal with this almost like all over again.
Well, and don't forget the freshmen.
Oh man.
They've, in a lot of ways, I hate saying they've been robbed of so much, because I mean, as bad as things are, we still live in America, and what what a fresh, what a graduating senior has had to go through this year, compares to nothing that you see in other parts of the world, where just getting, water is a big struggle. So, so I hate to say that they've been robbed of a lot, but certainly that's going to have, an impact on things, and they're being thrown into, into a world that, is, of young adults that, have maybe dealt with some of this on their own, away from parents for the, past couple of years, that, will, try to, may try to influence them one way or another, that, and they may get lost in a lot of that. But, outside of outside of, the freshmen coming back, I really, because the audience here are housing operators, I wanted to really talk with you guys about, preparing and training the staff. I don't know that there's a training manual for any of this, but, you know, Terence, you've been, when you and I first met, you were at a pretty prominent HBCU, and there were a lot of things related to the conversation, and it wasn't an all white, or excuse me, an all black staff. We had, white members on that staff as well. And I remember hearing you have some conversations of, yeah, you probably shouldn't give that look, or you shouldn't give that hesitation, things I never even thought about. And so, I wanted to kind of put that, to you and Quan, what kind of conversations should we be having with our staff right now in preparing them for students coming back, and the emotions that they're going to be having?
I would definitely have everyone ask the question, what do my policies look like? What programming am I planning for the fall? Is it tone deaf in light of everything that's happening? I know we like to plan, far in advance, but should I maybe retool some of this? What does the staff makeup look like at my company? When the students arrive here, do they see themselves represented in their environment? How can I better improve that? And I would say even deeper, we need to always be looking at what professional development opportunities can be provided to your staff to increase their understandings of the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. It's just so important. I think, especially with access, a lot of times we go to the bare minimum ADA requirements, and we have to really start thinking about what can we really do? What can we do beyond the bare minimum? Looking at equity and inclusion, and really the inclusion aspect, the enrichment of their environment, and making sure that it's welcoming. And lastly, do we have any company policies that may unintentionally cause harm to already marginalized communities? Do they exist? Can we take a look at, what we have on the books already? And what can we do to maybe retool them or make them better?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, communicating with our team members, I know as a property manager, it's very important for me to either start the day or to start the week off by bringing all of my managers together. And then, throughout the week, like meeting with each one of my team members to, either set those expectations or, to understand what their needs are for the day or for that week. And I think opening up that conversation, of course, within, our HR like bounds, but reviewing those, those policies and asking the questions, those tough questions as far as what policies would you like to see? Do you believe that the policies that we have, are fair? Are they right? And being, I guess, not afraid and unashamed to, kind of speak into that and allow for, the people that we manage and the people that we kind of supervise to, have those conversations with us. And, I have an open door policy, and, I've always believed in that. I will rarely, shut my door unless it's, something as far as a private conversation or a conference call that I don't necessarily want the office, like to really be a part of because of noise in the background. But just allowing for, my team members to, feel as if, okay, I can come to Terence, I can speak with him and I can let him know how I'm feeling. If it's a mental health day, if it's, like I'm just going through so much, allowing them to express, what's happening, because at the end of the day, we're humans. And yes, we're employees, and, like we are working for an organization, but after 6 o'clock, after 5 o'clock, or after 7 o'clock, and even before 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 in the morning, they have lives, they have, things that are on their minds and things that are in their hearts that we also have to, lean in towards. And the training and the background that I come from, I come from a student affairs residence life background where, we were trained to, make sure that we lean into that professional development. We lean into, that educational moment and understanding that everything that we interact with, everything that we experience can be an educational moment. And it's our responsibility as student affairs professionals, to make sure that we put that educational moment in front of our students, in front of our residents, and that we reinforce that because we are pretty much preparing them for, society after they graduate from college, after they leave our communities. They're going to another community. They may, like be a mother or a father, or they may work for a particular boss, or like have a particular like coworker. And so teaching them how to communicate, teaching them how to understand and handle conflict are very important like tools that I've been trained to prepare them on. And so just because I'm considered an off-campus operator doesn't necessarily mean that I turn that off. I
Right.
have taken all of those tools and all of those experiences, and I kind of shape those depending on the markets that I'm in, because each market is different. You're right. The HBCU in Greensboro was a completely different market from the market that I ended up transitioning into, while out in Kentucky, and now being back in South Carolina, like where I was born and raised, and then being, in Columbia, where, you've got the flagship university, it's a completely different market. And so taking all of those experiences and being able to, shape those for your specific community, I think it's also very important for managers to know the demographic of their community and really kind of catch the heartbeat of who their residents are, which of course, Wes, I mean, you used to train me and say, look, you need to know your residents by name. Do you know who they are? And
Absolutely.
I'm really understanding what that means now, is because you have to catch the temperament of the people that you serve, and you're serving them. I don't just say, hey, it's the first of the month, your rent is due, and then that's it. Like we're all people here, and these are people that you're serving, day in and day out for at least 12 months. And, like they become a part of like your community, like your family. You see them
Right.
on a daily, you see them catching the shuttle, you see them coming in to work out, you see them going to the computer lab, you share certain conversations with them. And so, getting on that level of a relationship is important, to lean into that trust, to be able to have those conversations and, understanding, okay, are we really being inclusive in our communities?
It really is about conversations, isn't it? I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's, Quan, I like what you said about, company policies. I think even, one suggestion I would certainly give to any of the property managers is, looking over your community policies. They're typically, pretty boilerplate for the most part, especially if you, work for, one of the top national housing providers. It's pretty sterile, right? But it is a good time to go back and take a look at that and say, hey, is there something here that that may need to be tweaked, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about planning events. Terence, you've done. I've seen you do some pretty amazing things with resident events to get everybody to come out and really have a good time. And that ends up, pouring into the resident retention, moving into subsequent years. And we've already been hit overside the head with this COVID thing and, having to do all these virtual events and limiting the size of some of the in-person events. Any suggestions that you guys have on, because Quan, you've got I saw the portfolio that, you put on LinkedIn of, of some events that you've done, and, they look fantastic. But I'm also sitting there looking at it and saying, yeah, there's no way that's happening this year without everybody wearing masks and everything else. Have you guys thought about that, and what suggestions would you give to your colleagues?
Yeah, I'm so glad that that you know brought up programming. I think it's so important. You're right. It's part of the heartbeat of the community. That's some of the bread and butter of what I love to do, to be able to connect with our students, and that's when you're able to get more genuine interactions with them. So I get
Absolutely.
excited about that. Um, some of the things that that I was thinking about specifically for this community is something that is simple, that can still be carried out throughout this, you know, COVID pandemic, is think about starting a book club where you dive into different types of literature that is both interesting and intriguing, but relevant, and helps to expand people's worldviews. And then for those who may not want to read books, look into deliberative dialogues. You have at your fingerprint or at your fingertips D&I professionals at most of the campuses that you are serving. Pull them in, pull in the people from your multicultural centers, ask them to come to your housing facilities, to your properties, and to hold conversations there with those students. When I was looking at our center's attendance and just looking at the breakdown of who was swiping into our area and who wasn't, most of the students who were minorities were commuters. So they were coming from our local off-campus facilities. And that was a project that we were about to start, is like, okay, how can we get to these, you know, communities and start offering services there? So just know that you have just a wealth of information and resources that are on the campuses that you serve. Utilize them, bring them on your property, and hold some tough conversations.
Mhm. And I'm also learning that, you know, those same university officials, you know, as much as being on the outside of the university, kind of looking into like how they're structured, you know, we have a tendency to, I guess, be afraid of stepping foot on the campus because we don't want to, I guess, offend, or we don't want to, I guess, like come on the campus too headstrong. But I'm also learning that those on campus, you know, like professionals, they want to, and they've been searching for how to reach out, but they just don't know how. And so one of the beautiful things at the University of South Carolina is that they actually have an off-campus housing department that facilitates those relationships for us, and they kind of point us in the right direction so that we don't necessarily have to feel as if, okay, you know, like, would I be wrong in sending this email, or, you know, can I like deliver this basket of goodies, you know, I'm like to learn who
Yeah.
this person is. But you're right, finding and understanding those resources and bringing those resources to the student. I've noticed that you know, when students, when they live on campus for a year or two, and then they transition, you know, off campus, there's a tendency to where they're kind of left alone, and they're kind of like, you know, sequestered out until, or if they kind of rise to the occasion to want to attend something on campus. And so, you know, part of my goal is to try to bring, you know, that on campus experience to the off campus experience. And just, you know, as I was preparing for, you know, like this moment to, you know, speak, you know, I began to think about, you know, the projections of, you know, the days of, you know, social events, as far as, you know, the pool parties, the pizza parties, and, you know, the things to really get people, you know, like rocking and rolling at your, you know, like at your property. I believe that, you know, students are a little more hungry for, you know, events that have substance. And so it brings me back to, you know, how I program, as far as being focused on, you know, a module that's called, you know, house. And a part of that house programming module is pretty much a foundation and a structure, as far as, you know, H standing for holistic programming, O standing for open-mindedness programming, U standing for unity-centered, programming, S standing for service learning, and then E standing for everyday skills. And so being more intentional about how we program, being more focused about how we program, and not just assuming that, okay, well, the only time that residents want to come out is if we serve food. That's not necessarily the case. I believe that, and I think Wes, I believe that we were, speaking about this as far as like an awakening, that students are now, I guess, walking in and being able to serve that awakening, and, in feeding their minds. And, we do have a responsibility in our programming to make sure that they have everything that they need, not just, like the fun events, because, that can also be a part of unity, as far as social, bringing everybody together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to shy away from, those, tough programming. It could be anywhere from, let's say mental health, or, sexual abuse or sexual assault, looking at the calendar and understanding Women's History Month, just there's all kinds of things that we can incorporate on our properties to still make fun, for, that social aspect, but bringing all students, or as many students and residents, into one center, to that clubhouse, to build a better sense of community. I feel as if it's going to be very important coming up in August. And I think that a lot of off-campus managers are going to be in for a rude awakening when, nobody really wants to show up for those pizza parties anymore,
Yeah.
without understanding what's actually going to be mentioned at this pizza party, you know, or if there's going to be a pool party, okay, all right, I can go to the pool, but what else are you doing about this? I believe that, the next generation of students and graduates, they are a little more concerned about things that are taking place in this world, and they want to do something about it. I was very shocked when I had one of my community assistants. She was very gung-ho about recycling. She was like, Terence, I love the community, but you need a recycling bin on the property. You need to have one. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She was like, I'm not alone. I want to recycle. Can you do something about it? But she was very passionate about that. And so I said, okay, well, if you're speaking to me about this, and, if you're telling me that there's other residents, that also want to recycle, then you know what, I'll look into seeing if that's possible, but it just kind of opened up my eyes again to really kind of catching the heartbeat of the community. Wow, there's more than, several residents that also want to recycle, and that's important to them. And so I have a responsibility to make sure that I'm catering to that demographic of my community. It's not just one track.
And again, I just wanted to make sure, for those that aren't seeing this on video form, again, that acronym was HOUSE, and that's the HOUSE module for resident programming. H is for holistic, O is for open-mindedness, U is for unity, and S is for service learning, and then E, everyday skills.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like, I stand by that. And, it's like a template. If you're ever stuck about what events to actually program, then I go back to that HOUSE module and I tell my team, and I said, okay, let's sit down and let's strategize this out for the month or for the week. What does our programming, like, one, what are the objectives? Is it just because we want to do it because, the standard says that we need to program 3 times a month or once a week? Are we concerned about our number count, or are we actually concerned about the educational component of why we program? Because one, Residence Life teaches us is that we want to be able to pull those people together, and we're pulling them together from all various experiences because they learn from one another. Just like today, we're all learning from one another as well. So essentially today, like, we're building kind of like a little community as far as all being centered around, this topic of discussion. And so we've got to be more intentional and more focused on why we're programming and what we're programming for.
I would even say, in simplest ways, a lot of properties have started putting up like more screens in their lobbies. It looks nicer. It's a better way to get out information.
Passive
Look at what
programming.
you're putting. Yeah, look at what you're putting on those screens. If you are able to do maybe a rolling art exhibit or something like that that features like Women's History Month, features topics related to that on the screen for people to see just when you're walking through, that makes a difference.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Those are some great ideas, and some good resources as well, Quan, because I don't know that everyone thinks about, both the D&I office on campus as well as other things that are in the community. I want to, talk a bit more about communication, because I've seen a lot of things that have resulted in managers being fired in the past couple of weeks because of things that were said uh, inadvertently, I guess is the best way of putting it, on social media that led to operators having to rethink, is this the is this going to cause an issue for us, as it relates to our residents, because the residents saw it on social media. It wasn't on the incidents that I'm aware of didn't happen on, property, social media, handles or pages or anything like that. And then on the other side, I've heard, from both managers who are people of color as well as managers that are white, that they're really kind of afraid of how to communicate with, both in a formal setting as well as just face to face. Wondering if you guys have, some, maybe it's something as simple as icebreakers, or maybe it's, love for it to be another fantastic acronym that you can throw out there, Terence, that everybody can remember really quick, as they, have these conversations. But, even when it comes to putting up notices on doors, I've heard from managers saying, I don't see anything wrong with this, but my property has had incidents of looting and that type of thing. These were mixed use properties with retail on the front, and so there had to be notices that were going out, letting residents be aware of things that they were expecting, and they were really afraid to send it out. They didn't know if it may invoke more more anger. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I think that we have to be stronger in our thinking as far as making those steps and not being afraid to have the conversation. I think that we can have certain conversations without offense. I think that we assume the offense before the offense actually happens. I think that especially off campus, I think our students and our residents that we serve, they want to be able to hear from us, in a certain way. I also feel, the stress and the frustration of my off-campus colleagues as far as making sure that we walk that fine line of fair housing and just making sure that, okay, all right, I don't want to step over that line because I don't necessarily want to, have a fair housing, suit on my hands. But I think that there is a way to have certain conversations without having to cross those lines. And I think sometimes we think that it's all about what we're seeing without thinking about what the student and the resident needs to say. And maybe we just need to just listen and just let them just kind of air how they're feeling. Again, like how we started off, like this segment, and I mentioned about, that listening aspect, really listening in from our community members and really listening in from our residents, and really maybe having like a town hall to where we say, hey, you know what, this week, at the end of the week or whatever date is convenient, like that we agree upon, I would love to be able to hear from you. And I know that I'm good about, like having these, I call them like these manager like cocktail receptions, not really serving cocktails, but just taking a pause in my day to where I'm not answering the phone, I'm not answering email, I'm out in the middle of my clubhouse so that residents and my team see that, okay, he is available, he is approachable, and that, I can have those conversations. I'm not behind my desk. You don't have to feel threatened to approach me. Um, I mean, like I wear a hat, I mean, like there's different things that I try to like make sure that like they know that like they can approach me. And I'm very like conscious and aware about that, so that residents and students or whomever is coming into the clubhouse, that they feel, I guess, a little less threatened, to approach and to have those conversations. But again, I do believe we can have those conversations. I think that we just have to make at least a step towards, certain conversations that I think our residents, I think will be shocked that they've been waiting for us to have with them.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Terence, I'm so glad that you reiterated that point of listening. I think that will be so key in this next season is just listening to our students and listening to the residents, um, understanding what it is they're trying to say, what their needs are. That'll help guide action and guide the tone of the environment. I would also just like to add, reiterate your anti-discriminatory policies and encourage them to make use of their leadership resources like Terence was, stating. He's out there in the lobby, he's making sure that people see him and know that he's there. Don't be afraid to send out a friendly email when you're welcoming, your students to come back and having your new residents join you, to let them know that you have a safe environment, that there are resources available to them, and that you are here to serve them.
Absolutely. And even, some things that we have started to do is that, well, not start to do, but, things that we've implemented at the property that I manage is that, each person that moves in, they get that courtesy call, they get that check-in call to say, hey, I'm just calling to follow up about your move-in. How are things going? How are you becoming acclimated to your roommates or, like to the unit? Is there anything else that I can do for you? Not just saying, hey, you signed the lease and now you're in, and I don't ever have to see you again. I always get worried about the residents that I don't hear from. I'm okay with the
Yeah.
residents that I hear from. You can scream at me, you can curse me out all day long, even though it does wear on my spirit and my body. However, it's the residents that I do not hear from that I'm concerned about because, you know, I don't know where their mind is. I don't know what they're feeling. I don't know if they have a certain level of anxiety or stresses that maybe I'm not focused on. What if they are having roommate issues that they're just maybe afraid to, to talk about? Like maybe they're
Yeah.
ashamed about the things that they're going through, and
And
so those residents that are a little more vocal, okay, all right, at least you're expressing yourself and you're getting it out. I'm I'm good with you. But the ones that I'm not hearing from at all, I really worry about. And so I may take a pause in the week to, shoot a text message, like from our texting platform. I may take a pause to send an email or to make a phone call or even to the parent to say, hey, I haven't heard from, such and such in a couple of days. I'm just checking in to see, how things are going. Just let me know if you need me to, like go to the apartment just to kind of see about them. And, again, those are all things that help overall with resident retention, but it's also just being, human as far as like building upon those relationships, not just building the relationship because you want the lease signed or you want the renewal, but just seeing that relationship all the way through. If I see you in Walmart or if I see you in Food Lion, I'm going to throw my hand up and I'm going to wave and I'm going to, hey, how are you? How's it going? Even if they may not speak back, I get it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, at least they know, oh,
yeah,
man, like he knows who I am outside of the community, like that I live on. Okay, all right. And then what I see is that after that interaction in Walmart, and they may not have spoken, they'll speak when they see me in the office now. It's like,
yeah.
oh, hey, how's it going? I'm like, okay, well, dang, that's all it took.
And that proactive those proactive measures, that proactive action can prevent you having to do de-escalation later
Yeah.
and having to fix situations later. So when you are keeping a good pulse on your community, when you are making sure to check in, then you're preventing having to go in and mediate between two, quad mates or roommates who are, just at it and at that
Mhm.
point at wits ends with one another. And definitely you don't want a situation where maybe they have filed a harassment claim against their roommate or something like that with the institution, and then the institution is contacting you asking questions. you those proactive measures can help prevent all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, before we move on to the roommate neighbor conflict, I
Dun,
want to
dun,
talk.
dun.
I want to talk really quick, just about building bridges with the police department.
Mhm.
Terrence, you and I, we had I've got 4 kids and still don't have enough fingers and toes in my family to count all of the times that we met with the Greensboro Police Department, and just from a proactive nature, um, and from a community standpoint of policing that neighborhood, and really from a standpoint of community policing as much as possible. And um, the um, we always talk about take the temperature of the room when you walk in, right? And um, right now, is it the smart thing to do to have community events, in which you're bringing in those community police officers?
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess really quick, what I would say is, it's important that if you are going to bring officers in, that you think about the context in which you're doing it and in the way that you're doing it. Maybe not bring them in their uniform. Maybe bring in plain clothes officers, or bring in people who maybe are at a higher level within the police unit to speak to not only how they plan to serve that community, but what they are doing in a larger sense within their local jurisdiction to serve that community and to ensure equity within their environment and for their community members that they're entrusted to serve. I also would just add, if you are a property that's close to campus, build a great relationship with the campus police and campus security.
Yes.
They are another great resource as well. They're more familiar with dealing with that particular demographic day in and day out. And if they're willing to, and if they're able to, they would more than likely be the better resource to go to before going to your local law enforcement.
Or if your property has a courtesy officer or a resource officer that's living on site, I think that it's important that if your community is going to have, you know, that presence at your community, the residents need to know who that person is, not just when something happens, but now would be the time to, one, have that conversation with your courtesy officer, with your resource officer, bring them into the office and have that one-on-one with them, listen to maybe some of the concerns that they may have, like what are they seeing or or hearing, like when they're doing their patrols at night, really understanding like what it is they do on a day-to-day or from a night to night, and then trying to figure out a way to either reintroduce them to the community or build upon like what that officer has already experienced at the community. Our courtesy officer, he was also a university police officer, everybody knows him, and they knew him because why? He gave the freshman presentation. So when they saw Officer Adams, oh my God, it's Officer Adams, there he is. And so like we had a different feel at our community because we had somebody that the students were familiar with. They trusted him. They leaned on him for advice. They felt comfortable with him coming, I guess, to their rescue or to their aid if they had any issues. And so I think that, other off-campus housing communities, if you have those officers, make sure that you have those meetings and that you, introduce or reintroduce that officer to the community in the right way, to where those residents feel as if they can trust that officer. And I think that if the community does not trust that officer, I think that as property managers, we should also take ear to that, and we should understand why the community does not trust that officer. And maybe it might be time to switch it up. Maybe it might be time to find, the right officer that can serve the community that you need that officer to actually do for you. Because, we could be wrong. Maybe we stepped on a property that always had that officer there. And, because it just came along with, like what fell in our lap, we just, hey, if it's not broke, let's not fix it. But, listening in again to our residents, if the residents are saying, hey, this is what is actually happening when you're leaving the office at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, I really need you to pay attention to this. I think that it's worth looking into because, what we're finding is that there are officers that are out there that may not have the best intention, and they may say the wrong thing. They may be doing the wrong thing. They may have other stresses or, like things that are going on that they may just either make a mistake or, didn't mean to say, or maybe they meant to say it, but at least, letting the community know that we are paying attention and that we're also understanding what their needs are from that point of view.
Gotcha. So I want to get on to, what happens when everything you've done to be proactive, it still didn't prevent something from happening, or maybe you weren't proactive and now all of a sudden you found yourself with a conflict between, be it roommates or neighbors. Terence, you've got a fabulous background in res life, as with counseling, and I've personally seen you diffuse some pretty heated disputes between roommates.
Yes.
Your property in Columbia houses students from both USC as well as Benedict College, which is an HBCU institution. You and I have had discussions about conflicts that you've tried to mitigate over the past couple of years between students, and it's not necessarily even a white student from USC and a black student from Benedict. It could be two black students from each of those universities that may have some different opinions, right, and different backgrounds, certainly. First, I want to ask you: are you concerned that that there's going to be roommate and neighbor conflicts that may erupt this year at your property due to the events from this spring? I shouldn't say at your property specifically, but are you fearful of that within student housing this year?
I don't necessarily want to use the word fearful or concerned. I think that we should always be prepared for, like roommate conflict, whether it's around race or whether it's because your boyfriend comes over too much or you're not taking out the trash. I think we should always be prepared to have those, tough conversations. I think even more so now, we have to ready ourselves for if your roommate placements have already gone out, making sure that your leasing manager or whomever is in charge of your room placements, really understanding that roommate application and those preferences, really understanding, okay, why are we, like placing certain people together, like without violating fair housing, but, really kind of testing the temperature of your applicants and, like remembering again, if you know your residents, if you know your prospects, and you remember, like that experience and those interactions, then it makes the placement better, to where you don't have to be as fearful or as concerned, because you realize who the people that you're placing, you're like specifically placing them based on those interactions and those preferences of what will suit best in that particular unit. And I think that's what, has made, the community that I manage, like successful, is that, we have the ability to just kind of like, I guess, step into that and, and establish that relationship from the beginning, and remembering those conversations and remembering those interactions to where, we feel, somewhat confident in saying, okay, this should be good. But of course, you're going to have those roommate conflicts to where, they're not going to see eye to eye. And of course, the roommate placement emails have gone out, and you're going to, get those phone calls to where you're going to have, a future resident say, hey, I need my roommate placement switched. Why? Like, what's wrong? Well, I looked them up on Facebook, or I looked them up on Instagram, or my friend is connected with them on Snapchat, and I just don't like what I see. I don't think this is going to work out. What do you mean this is not going to work out? And then they begin to proceed by just continuing to say, it's just not going to work out. I've just seen some things that it's just not going to work. And so you wonder, okay, what really is driving this, and you're really wanting them to say what you think, is the problem. But of course, you can't drive them to, like to say something that they're not going to say, but you're right. There's going to be some conflict, like between where someone was raised, what their experience has been, what they believe their preferences are. But I believe that we should at least try at least once. And especially having that residence life background is, hey, like, what's the problem here? Like, how can I help you come to the table? How can I help you meet this person in the middle, to understand where this other person is coming from, so that we can try to move, like in another direction, not separately, but together. So I try my best to salvage each and every roommate conflict without transfer if I can, because I think it's
Because you're
important.
100%.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I really try, like to really like give it that honest effort and really understand, like, okay, one, I don't like dealing with, just the backlog of transferring, and, that's a lot within itself. But, I tell my residents when I'm trying to mediate a situation that if you're not able to mediate this conflict because your roommate does not wash the dishes every night after they cook, what's going to happen when you are in a relationship with a partner or someone that has maybe worse habits than your roommates? How are you going to communicate that to them? How are you going to communicate to your coworker or your boss that you don't really see eye to eye, or you can't really understand why they do things a certain way? Are you going to put sticky notes over the entire office? Are you going to put sticky notes, like to your spouse over the house and not speak to them for a week? Are you going to feud over the thermostat, like readings between 72 degrees versus 73 degrees? But I'm also learning that the way that residents communicate, it's very surface like, and really taking the time to really understand what's, underneath the surface. What's fueling this? Like, what's happening? Okay, it's not just about 72 degrees versus 73 degrees. It's a matter of differences from experiences, and, and also preferences, the perspectives that they have. Why do you feel like the dishes need to be washed every night? Or why do you feel as if, having like friends over from, a Bible study group, like, is offensive to you, And so really understanding, just the why of that, helps me mediate through, a lot of those roommate conflicts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess Terence, thank you so much. The only thing that I would add on to that is, again, don't be afraid to knock on the university you serve's door. They have tons and tons of resources. I think Terence kind of alluded to this aspect earlier of maybe being afraid to reach out to the community, but I know that similar to what was mentioned earlier, our institution and many other institutions do have off-campus or commuter offices that can help you with that that communication. And then furthermore, a lot of offices or a lot of campuses have offices that exist to assist with mediation. And so if it is something deeper that maybe they really do need some more help with, don't be afraid to reach out. This is, student affairs professionals. A lot of them don't do it for the money. They do it because they care for the students, So use the resources that are at your fingertips. Don't try and reinvent the wheel, but also be willing to go deeper with them, because it is true. A lot of students only want to talk on the surface.
Yeah. And I think it does vary university to university. I wish I could say every university has that mentality of wanting to help. And I'm not saying that the individuals don't, but I've certainly run into issues where the university doesn't necessarily want to take on some additional liability.
Yeah.
Especially if there is a non-student that may be part of the issue. But it's but the overwhelming majority are willing to step in, certainly. So guys, we are like 15 minutes over from what we originally
good conversation
were planned. And and I think there's going to be more like this, and I really appreciate you guys taking the extra time and taking the time today to be a part of it. Quan, I know you're still in the job search, and I'm telling you, man, there are folks in the off-campus privatized world that need folks like you. And I would say if you are if you work in student housing, or if you're a university faculty or staff member, and you've heard Quan's story, and you know that there's a need for that in your organization or your institution. Quan has got a fantastic LinkedIn page. I would suggest that you go there to connect with him, and because I don't want to give out your personal email address on something that's going to be on YouTube, but certainly reach out to him with a DM on LinkedIn. And you've got some great content that you're posting there too, as far as what's kind of related to what's going on in Lynchburg right now, and love following you there. Is there anywhere else that I know you're involved also with Many Voices, One Community, which is a specific to Lynchburg, and you're a board member there? Is there if someone's in that area and they want to get more information about MVOC, where's a good location, or where's a good place for them to
they can
find
actually
out more info?
they can just email us at mvocva@gmail.com, and we can meet with them and help them answer questions about the Lynchburg area. If they want to get plugged into our community, we would love it. We welcome it. And we look forward to those different collaborations.
Well, perfect. Well, guys, take care. I appreciate it so much. And to the few of those attendees that are still left watching this live, thank you for attending today. I hope that you found it very informative, and hopefully gives you a little bit more confidence with what is ahead for you for this next year, be it for your property or your portfolio. This has been the last session for this particular installment for preparing for fall 2020. We're already working on content for this upcoming fall, and a lot of subject matters that we know that will be coming up. And I would just say be on the lookout for more announcements on certainly on that. And of course, with FeedLoop, if you're registered there, and I think Cindy Peterson from Peak Campus, it looks like you're still logged in here. I got your message. I will, we are in the middle of editing some things to get everything up on FeedLoop and on our YouTube channel. We did have one issue where something didn't get recorded, a particular session didn't get recorded, but otherwise we've got it all. It's just taking some time to edit and get that out. So be on the lookout for that, both in our YouTube channel as well as on the FeedLoop platform. You can go back and pull all this and see it in its entirety, just like you were at a conference. So thanks for joining. And again, to all of our panelists today, thanks for being a part of this, and thank you for your time. Take care, guys.
Thank you.